After years of speculation, Foxhole finally dropped a trailer confirming that planes are coming to the game next year, and I could not be more excited to animate them for videos. So I got a little ahead of myself. Aircraft are going to fundamentally change how Foxhole is played. The trailer showcased three kinds of aircraft: the Warden Fighter, the Colonial Bomber, and a transport plane. These probably would have changed how a lot of the battles that I've covered on this channel would have played out. Like, for example, the Battle of Silver. We were surrounded by the enemy, stuck on our island, and making desperate blockade runs with barges just to resupply our forces. Adding an airborne axis of resupply would have been a game changer for situations like these.
There's no more shirts on this island. Fight to the last man.
And on the offensive side, large-scale naval invasions would have new options for troop insertion, beach clearing, and a lot of behind enemy lines action. Imagine the constant threat of getting your supply line strafed by enemy fighters unless you maybe deployed some fighters of your own. I have to say though, the transport aircraft are very interesting. While it does have doors for airborne infantry to jump out of, it does have a strangely square rear end. It doesn't feel like too much of a stretch to say that they could be used to make supply drops. I think you could fit a flat-packed Argonaut in there, just like the old Willis Jeeps from World War II. The possibilities for partisans behind enemy lines destroying infrastructure and logistics would be unimaginable. And it would have made the Siege of Tyne in War 116 a lot more forgiving. That's for sure.
We have nothing. We don't have ammo for our guns, and we cannot leave the region.
There we basically had the Battle of the Bulge at home, wherein we had undersupplied troops holding border bases to cut off enemy logistics, while our main forces were busy dealing with the main enemy advance behind us. I would have loved to see supplies get airdropped for us there. The trailer also showcased the Warden Fighter, which might just be the first combat vehicle in Foxhole that only needs one person to operate it. And something to note, while not all shown in use in the trailer, they do sport two guns on their wings, along with a single large gun pod at the base of the plane. Strafing runs from up above would be the nightmare of all open-top colonial vehicles. It's a good thing that there aren't a lot of those. And lastly, the Colonial Bomber. This thing is enormous, and it looks like it'll need a crew of 4, maybe 5 people. A pilot, 2 or 3 gunners, and probably a bombardier. It's shown hitting everything from tanks on the ground to facility buildings, to even making runs on a Warden battleship. This thing is going to be a monster. But how that monster would be built, stored, and operated? We have no idea. In one of the pre-rendered cinematic shots in the trailer, they showed fighters being stored in hangars, no surprise there. But imagine the size of the hangar needed to store one of the larger planes. And the runway. The amount of space that would need to be used might be a little much. Airfields would have to facilitate takeoffs, landings, rearming, and maybe repairs. So they'll probably need a lot of room. Logistics hubs already take up a lot of space on the map, and I wonder just how much space airfields would have to use on top of all of that if they do end up being player-built structures, especially if we have to build things like concrete hangars specifically to store aircraft for QRF. The thing is, when Foxhole added large boats like battleships, a lot of the associated infrastructure was built in the water. It was free real estate. Dry docks and piers didn't take up space that was already in use. Things might be a little different for airfields. We'll just have to wait and see. Maybe they'll add a lot of seaplanes. For now, the closest preview we'll get to airfields are the hangars in home region and the decrepit airfield in Stone Cradle, all of which seem to use the same aircraft for both colonials and wardens. Weird. But I'm sure that regardless of how airfields are built in the game, people will make airfields out of anything. Planes might need to make emergency landings who knows where, and I'm sure there are gonna be groups of players out there that looks at piers and say, you know what? That's an aircraft carrier. Or the meta will be something goofy like crate cities with second floors dedicated to aircraft landings. Who knows? I do want to touch on air defense and flight mechanics a bit. The devs have stated that originally, the flight models in their internal test servers were a little bit on the realistic side and required some level of skill to even just get to the target and engage it. So, they said they're still tweaking the whole system, but reading that they had a working plane earlier this year that they could just hop into and fly around made me very hopeful for their progress. That being said, I can't wait to see the first emergency landings in-game. Just think of the LARP opportunities of forcing enemy aircraft to go down in your own territory. Of course though, these aircraft can't fly around unopposed, and I'm sure that we'll be given some type of air defense options in the game. The trailer did show some flak explosions in one of the cinematic shots after all. It's not hard to imagine typical options like flak guns or AI bunkers specifically for anti-air purposes, kind of like an anti-air howitzer, and I can think of a few vehicles that could probably do with an anti-air facility variant. But having to have this extra layer of defenses would have complicated things, like the defense of the rocket at the Linn of Mercy in War 117, where we packed those last lines of defenses with all the howitzers and concrete we could to dissuade enemy artillery. Having an extra layer just for anti-air options, I'm not sure if we had the space. Maybe we'd start considering having fighters loitering around instead. It just adds more options for both the attacking and defending sides, and I think that's kind of neat. Or maybe, just maybe, we'll have some, wackier options for air defense. This is a barrage balloon. They were used in World War I and World War II, and were essentially just blimps that lifted up wires to block or explode enemy aircraft that were trying to dive in. But given that Foxhole is a top-down shooter, having giant blimps hang around might be a bit of a visual obstruction, to say the least. Although I'm sure that players will make their own barrage balloons using whatever tools they have at their disposal. Now, I know I've talked about airfields, but I really want to talk about this one shot from the trailer. Planes on trains. Not only does this look very cool to me, but it brings up frontline logistics for planes. Perhaps prolonged sieges will see temporary airfields being built outside enemy bases for planes to refuel, rearm, and be repaired before continuing to bomb and strafe the enemy base. Maybe trains will be the ideal way to transport larger aircraft that have no nearby airfields to take off from. Either that or you'll need a lot of flatbeds. Oh, and pilot and paratrooper uniforms are coming too. The Colonial paratrooper uniform looks pretty snazzy. But we still don't have any naval uniforms. It's been a year. So this is all so very exciting, but I do have a couple of concerns that I'm sure that the devs have thought about at least once. While I have always wanted planes in Foxhole, one of my main concerns was, well, rendering. Aircraft tend to move pretty quickly, and anyone who's used binoculars to look at giant concrete bases in Foxhole knows exactly how laggy it can get. Luckily, the trailer doesn't show planes moving at crazy speeds, besides that cinematic shot of those fighters diving down onto the colonial bombers and just destroying them. If planes moved too fast, they'd definitely be locked to players with high-end PCs that could actually render everything quick enough. And I could imagine that that would be a bit of a disappointment for the rest of the player base. But I'm still excited. I for one am very glad that Foxhole still provides big, game-changing updates like Naval Warfare and Airborne for free. It's amazing. Thanks, DevMan. So, can we get aircraft carriers in the future too? I promise I'll be nice. For now, we get to enjoy the infantry update, which includes the fact that vehicles can now get muddy, making this scene from War 117 look so much more important. Gotta love the LARP.
Stop. Need a car
Stop.
wash. Need a car wash.